God's chosen one, stop right now. Don't scroll. Don't hesitate. Don't reassure yourself that I'm just overthinking it, because if, for this brief moment, you feel your heart slow down, the skin on the back of your neck tighten, and a very uncomfortable yet familiar feeling arises that someone is secretly watching you, paying attention to you, knowing more than they should know, then listen carefully to every word that follows, because this is not imagination, not suspicion, nor is it your mind concocting a story to create a sense of importance, but a very instinctive human reaction when they begin to step out of their safe, invisible zone and get closer to what they truly possess within themselves. You've probably felt this before, the feeling that even though you don't show off, don't flaunt, don't make a fuss, somehow there are still eyes watching, still whispers and gossip, still obstacles appearing just when you're about to break through, as if some force doesn't want you to go any faster, doesn't want you to cross an invisible boundary that they themselves can't name. And the scariest thing isn't the obvious obstacle, but its subtlety, because it comes in the form of advice for your own good, in the form of feigned worry, in the form of seemingly harmless remarks that plant tiny, subtle doubts in your mind, enough to make you slow down, doubt yourself, and wonder if you're going too far. Have you noticed that the less you talk, the more others speculate? The more secretive you are, the more curious people become. The more focused you are on your work, the more disapproving glances appear, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your presence starts to cause a kind of disturbance that not everyone can tolerate. Humans have a very primal reflex. They only observe, they only pay attention, they only try to control things that they feel might get out of their control in the future. Listen carefully to this. No one wastes energy scrutinizing a harmless person. No one bothers with someone incapable of progressing beyond their current position, and no one tries to obstruct someone going in the wrong direction. What makes them silently observe you is the hidden potential you possess, something you may not yet name or fully believe in, but they have sensed it, and that's why they begin to behave in a very familiar way, not attacking directly, not confronting openly, but creating an environment that forces you to restrain yourself. Do you often find yourself in strange situations where everything seems ready but suddenly goes off track, where opportunities slip through your fingers just as you're about to seize them, where you regain your confidence only to be immediately thrown back into a defensive posture? And if you're honest with yourself, you'll notice a very clear pattern. Every time you get closer to your true self, the pressure around you increases, the resistance becomes more subtle, and the feeling of being watched becomes more pronounced. This is when many people begin to deny their intuition, calling it anxiety, sensitivity, fatigue, because believing that someone is watching me sounds too dramatic, too self-important. But the truth is that intuition doesn't need drama. It just needs to be accurate. And your intuition isn't saying you're more important than others. It's just saying you're no longer invisible. There are people who don't need direct contact with you. They just need to stand on the edge of your life, quietly observing how you think, how you react, how you get back up after each setback, and from that, they silently form a conclusion. You're not the type to be easily molded back into the old mold, and that very conclusion is what makes them uncomfortable. God's chosen one. You need to understand a cold but clear truth. When you start emitting a different frequency, those accustomed to control will feel insecure. And when people are insecure, they don't choose confrontation. They choose manipulation. They sow doubt. They slow you down. They make you question yourself. Because the easiest way to stop someone from moving forward is not to push them back, but to make them stand still. Let this sink in deeply. Not everyone who cares about you wants you to go far. Not everyone who asks about you wants you to be better, and not all attention is well-intentioned. Some eyes only want to ensure that you don't cross a certain limit, a limit that, if you cross it, will disrupt their familiar order. If right now you feel a chilling confirmation run down your spine, as if something inside you is silently nodding, it's not because I'm speaking well, but because you've lived with this feeling long enough to recognize it when it's called by name. And remember this key phrase carefully. Don't argue, don't explain, just acknowledge. Someone is silently watching you, and they don't have good intentions. Not in the sense that they'll openly harm you, but in the sense that they don't want you to become the person you're striving to be. Because when you stand in your true place, many of the roles around you lose their meaning. And the moment you dare to look straight at this truth without panic, without denial, without self-deception, you've crossed a threshold you've never stood before. And from here on, things will no longer operate as they used to. God's chosen one, there's a very familiar feeling you've carried long enough to no longer name it. A feeling so recurring that you've told yourself you're being too sensitive, too overthinking, but deep down, you always know it's not. It's the feeling of being watched without anyone saying it directly, being noticed without anyone openly acknowledging it, as if an invisible gaze is always present behind you, not clear enough for you to turn around and face it, but close enough to prevent you from ever truly relaxing. You walk into a space and everything seems normal. Smiles are present, greetings are exchanged, the atmosphere is relaxed. But when you leave, you know something has been discussed. You can guess it without even listening, because you're so used to that deliberate silence, where people don't confront you directly, but choose to shape your image in conversations you're not present. Each small remark, each half-hearted comment, each "I'm just worried about you" is dropped softly, but is enough to change how others see you. As a chosen one of God, you too have clearly felt the pain of being slandered behind your back in a subtle way, without the need for blatant fabrication, just enough distortion of the truth, omitting the most important parts, and retaining details that make you appear difficult to understand, difficult to work with, or unstable. What exhausts you isn't the slander itself, but the lack of counter-arguments, because everything is disguised under the guise of concern, worry, or constructive criticism. If you speak up, you appear defensive, while if you remain silent, you implicitly accept the image they are painting. And perhaps what makes this feeling most deeply ingrained in you is that at those moments when you're about to break through, about to cross a threshold, about to touch an opportunity that could change your trajectory, there's always an invisible force that appears at the right moment. Not loudly, not confrontationally, just a very reasonable warning, a seemingly objective delay, a small event, but enough to make you hesitate, enough to make you wonder, maybe I'm not ready yet. And if you look back honestly, you'll see that this coincidence has happened too many times to be called random. You are God's chosen one, and what's noteworthy is that all of this doesn't happen openly. No one comes forward declaring they don't want you to move forward. No one openly places barriers in front of you. Everything unfolds in calculated silence, in seemingly harmless actions, but perfectly timed, perfectly placed, precisely at the moment you begin to believe in yourself a little more, begin to stand a little taller, begin to think that perhaps you weren't born to stay in this position forever. You've tried to rationalize it all, telling yourself that it's probably the same in any environment, that success must come with criticism, that anyone who goes against the crowd will be noticed. But the more you try to normalize it, the more clearly that familiar feeling returns, because your intuition is trying to tell you something that reason is still hesitant to admit, that the attention you're receiving isn't random, but selective, that you're not being scrutinized because you're weak, but because you're no longer as easily controlled as before. God's chosen ones rarely confront you directly, because their goal isn't to defeat you, but to slow you down, to make you adjust yourself to a safe level, to make you doubt your own feelings. And the most effective way to do that is to remain invisible, to avoid making noise, to not give you a clear target to confront. Because when you don't know what you're up against, it's easy to turn the tables on yourself. Over time, this strangely familiar feeling becomes a part of your life. You learn to be cautious, to speak less, to keep your plans to yourself, to slow down, even though you know inside you could go further. And the most dangerous thing is that you begin to consider this state normal, as if being scrutinized without anyone saying it directly. being bad-mouthed behind your back, being blocked just when you're about to break through is something you have to accept, while the truth is that not everyone lives under such invisible pressure. If these words sound not only familiar, but also resonate with very specific memories within you, moments you've sat alone, wondering why everything keeps repeating itself in the same way, then know that this feeling doesn't come from your imagination, but from a series of real, silent, inconspicuous, yet purposeful encounters. Your realization of this now is a sign that you are no longer entirely in the unconscious state you once were. God's chosen one. If you're reading this and feel a tight, heavy sensation in your chest, as if something is being pulled out of the familiar silence, let me get straight to the point you've always avoided. The one targeting you is never a stranger, never an outsider, but so close that you've shared space, time, stories, even unformed thoughts. And it's this closeness that makes the feeling so unsettling, because you don't feel attacked from the front, but observed from behind, not with overt hostility, but with a silent, prolonged gaze, long enough for you to begin to sense it, even when no one says anything. Have you noticed that these people often know very well who you used to be, where your weaknesses were, what your dreams were? And that's why they are also the first to notice when you start to change, when your silence is no longer the same, when your eyes no longer seek agreement, when your life no longer aligns with its old rhythm. That moment creates a very special kind of tension, because your change is not just a personal change, but an unintentional mirror reflecting parts of themselves that have been neglected for too long. God's chosen ones, some of whom begin to compare themselves to you without even realizing it, ask seemingly caring questions like, "What are you doing these days? Are you really going in that direction? Are you sure?" These words sound light, but beneath the surface lies a subtle measurement, a quick weighing of whether the distance between you and them is widening or narrowing. When they realize that gap isn't easily bridged, their most natural reaction isn't admiration, but defensiveness. The stimulating yet uncomfortable feeling you're experiencing is the sensation of being viewed with a mixture of curiosity and threat, where you're no longer just you, but become a variable in someone else's frame of reference, something that forces them to question themselves. And people rarely like questions they're not ready to answer. Notice more closely, these people don't need to hate you loudly. They just need to be a little colder when you talk about your plans, a little more silent when you achieve something, or steer the conversation to a different topic when you inadvertently reach a new point. It's these small details that matter. This creates a very strong sense of stimulation in the listener, because your brain recognizes the disharmony before you can even name it, leaving you both wary and confused, wanting to move forward while simultaneously observing your surroundings. God's chosen ones have gazes that don't stem from pure hatred, but from seeing in you something they lack, not money or status, but the ability to endure without breaking, the ability to maintain direction when no one supports you, the ability to be different without ostentation. And it is this very thing that ignites the deepest insecurities within a person, because it cannot be taken away, copied, or faked. The feeling of being targeted that you are experiencing doesn't come from a dramatic plot. It comes from a very real shift in energy, where you are no longer standing still in your old role, and that forces those who were used to your old version to readjust their perceptions, and not everyone does that in a healthy way. Let this sentence go straight to your nervous system, slowly but deeply, without needing an immediate reaction. They don't hate you because you're ugly. They're not annoyed because you do wrong. They hate you because you're different, because your difference exposes their stagnation, because each step you take is a silent reminder that they've stopped somewhere without daring to admit it. And it is at the moment you realize this that the excitement within you will shift from bewilderment to alertness, from passive to active observation, because you understand that you don't need to shrink to make someone more comfortable. You don't need to explain or prove anything, but simply continue with a discreet but steady presence, Because once you've been targeted, the most dangerous thing isn't their gaze, but the moment you begin to adjust yourself to that fear. And when you don't, when you maintain your rhythm amidst those silent gazes, you will clearly feel another change taking place within, a cold but firm feeling. That you are no longer someone who accidentally walked into the spotlight, but someone who is aware of where you stand, and it is that awareness that makes the whole game begin to shift. As God's chosen one, when you look directly at being targeted and no longer reassure yourself that it's just a coincidence, the initial fear will gradually transform into a deeper and far more unsettling question. Why you? Why, among so many people, so many faces, so many noisy individuals out there, did that gaze stop on you? The answer doesn't lie in what you've done that's extraordinary, but in how you are present even when you're not trying to do anything. You are the kind of person who doesn't need to show off but still stands out, doesn't need to talk much but is still noticed, doesn't need to stand in a crowd but still makes the space around you adjust to you. You may have thought you were too ordinary, that you just quietly did your work, that you didn't play tricks, didn't create an image, didn't manipulate anyone, but it is precisely this awareness that makes the whole situation begin to change. Being straightforward is what makes you irritating to those who are used to the act, because they don't understand why you still move forward without using the tools they use, why you are still trusted when you're not fake, and why you don't need to prove anything yet people still listen. God's chosen one. You possess a very special kind of energy, where your presence itself is a message, where you don't need to occupy space, yet still make others feel it. And this triggers a very instinctive reaction in those who live by comparison, because your existence reveals a truth they don't want to face. That there are people who advance through consistency, not gimmicks. There are people who are believed for who they are, not for their acting skills. You don't need to show off to stand out because you don't scatter your energy to seek attention. You keep it, accumulate it, and accumulated energy always carries weight, always creates a pull without a call. And it is this silent pull that makes others' eyes linger longer than they would like to acknowledge. You move forward without resorting to tricks because you don't need to push anyone down to climb. You move at your own pace, slow but steady. This makes those accustomed to climbing through underhanded tactics feel insecure, because they can't use the same yardstick to read you. They can't predict you using familiar formulas. And when people can't predict, they observe, they scrutinize, they try to understand or try to restrain you. As a chosen one of God, you are trusted because in the way you speak, the way you are silent, the way you react to pressure, there is a consistency that is very difficult to fake. This consistency is felt by others, even without being able to name it. It gives your words weight, even when you're not trying to persuade. And it is this very consistency that reveals the emptiness in relationships built on masks. Notice that those who are most uncomfortable with you are often those who have to put on a show to maintain their position, because your natural presence makes all the roles around you more obvious, and no one likes being scrutinized while trying to hide themselves. You, chosen one of God, the focus you feel is neither punishment nor ill omen. It is the natural consequence of you carrying light, not a noisy light, not an ostentatious light, but the light of inner clarity, of knowing who you are and not needing to become someone else to be accepted. And it is this kind of light that attracts the attention of darkness. Because darkness is not afraid of noise, darkness only reacts to what has the ability to shine. When you begin to understand this, your fear will transform. It will no longer be passive confusion, but deliberate awareness. You will no longer ask why they do this to you, but will begin to realize that being noticed is a sign that you have gone far enough to create a contrast, different enough to no longer blend in, and strong enough not to need an explanation. O chosen one of God, let this axiom anchor itself firmly in your consciousness, not to foster pride, but to keep you from shrinking yourself. Only those who carry light are noticed by darkness, and that light isn't something you turn on to show off. but something that has been formed over the years you've chosen to live authentically, to be genuine, to avoid pretense, to keep going even when no one applauds. When you understand that the reason you're targeted lies in that very nature, you no longer need to avoid the gaze, nor challenge it. You simply need to continue being present as you truly are. Because from the moment you shift from fear to understanding, the entire psychological balance shifts, and you are no longer someone being dragged into someone else's game. God's chosen one. Once you understand why that gaze rests on you and not others, when fear transforms into awareness, you will begin to recognize very specific, very ordinary signs that are so powerfully confirming that they cannot be ignored. Importantly, you don't need to believe me. You just need to compare them to your own experiences and silently nod in agreement. The first signs often appear as baseless rumors without a clear source, with no one taking responsibility. Yet they spread quickly enough to shape how others see you. These stories may seem small and harmless at first glance, but when pieced together, you'll find they always revolve around the same axis, the same vague suspicion about you, as if someone is trying to paint a different version of you in others' minds before you even have a chance to step into a new position. Then comes an even more unsettling sign, an unusual silence from people who used to be very close. It's not an argument, no conflict, just a sudden distance that appears without explanation. Messages are no longer answered with the same rhythm, conversations become short and emotionless, and you sense very clearly that it's not natural busyness, but a deliberate withdrawal, as if your presence now makes them uncomfortable, forcing them to confront something within themselves they're not ready for. For God's chosen one, the third sign often strikes at the very moment you're about to break through. The opportunity is thwarted at the last minute, not because you made a mistake, not because you lacked ability, but because an external factor appears at precisely the right moment, very coincidentally, enough to derail everything. And if you look back enough times, you'll see this pattern repeat itself suspiciously, because those opportunities don't disappear gradually. They're snatched away just as you're about to grasp them, as if someone doesn't want you to cross a certain threshold. And then there's a subtle yet easily recognizable sign, if you pay attention. The energy of the environment changes when you appear. The room is the same, the people are the same, but the air becomes heavier or more tense. Conversations slow down, eyes glance over you faster than usual, or subtly avoid you, and you sense it before you even have time to analyze it, because your body reacts faster than your mind, making you both wary and curious, wanting to move forward while observing your surroundings. For God's chosen one, what makes these signs important is not the individual signs, because everyone can encounter one at some point in their life, but how they appear together, revolving around you, repeating in the same pattern, and often flaring up most intensely when you're about to enter a new phase, when you begin to live a little more in line with your own light. Stop and ask yourself honestly, without defensiveness, without self-pity, without trying to prove anything to anyone. Let's say that among those things, how many have actually happened to you, not just once, but clearly enough for you to remember, long enough for you to feel, and frequent enough that you can no longer consider them random? Because if at least 3 of those things are true for you, if you've experienced baseless rumors, unusual silence from former friends, last-minute missed opportunities, and a shift in the surrounding energy, when you appear, then you need to accept a cold but liberating truth. That this isn't a coincidence, bad luck, or your imagination, but the natural consequence of being in a position where not everyone wants you to be. And when you realize that, this checklist is no longer something to fuel fear, but becomes a tool to help you understand where you are on your journey, to stop doubting your own feelings, to stop trying to shrink everything to fit the old space, and to begin walking with a new awareness, where you don't need to confront things directly, don't need to loudly explain, but simply maintain the light within you, because that light is the reason you are noticed, and it is what will guide you. Next, when you no longer view these signs as threats, but rather as confirmation that you are no longer in the same place. God's chosen one, once you recognize the signs that you're being targeted and no longer deceive yourself into thinking it's just a coincidence, there's a crucial truth that those silently observing you completely overlook. They've misread your true nature from the start. From the outside, they see a quiet, reserved, unassuming person, not overly defensive, and they quickly conclude that you're vulnerable, that just a little more pressure, a few disturbances, a few well-timed obstacles will break you, confuse you, and make you withdraw. But what they don't understand, and don't have the depth to understand, is that you weren't formed from ease but from resilience, not forged in an easy environment, but in periods where you had to hold your breath to move forward. Therefore, pressure doesn't break you in the way they imagine. It reveals another layer within you that you only begin to realize when everything is squeezed tightly. God's chosen ones think that when targeted, you'll react rashly, become hot-tempered, and expose yourself in unnecessary confrontations. But they don't see that you've learned to withstand pressure without losing your bearings, learned to let the tension pass through your body without controlling your decisions, learned to remain silent, not out of fear, but because you understand that an ill-timed counterattack only exposes you sooner. And each time you avoid falling into their trap, each time you don't react according to their expected scenario, the tide turns subtly. There's a paradox that only those who have been pressured long enough understand. The more you're cornered, the more alert you become, not alert in the sense of heightened vigilance, but alert in the sense of seeing clearly, seeing who is acting out of fear, who is being triggered by your differences, and who truly stands by your side. It is this awareness that they don't anticipate, because they are used to pressure causing others to become disoriented, while you use pressure as a filter, filtering out illusions, filtering out the need to be understood, filtering out the urge to prove yourself. For God's chosen ones, when you don't retaliate recklessly, when you don't respond even to the most subtle attacks, another mechanism begins to operate, quietly, dramatically, but very real. Protection is activated around you, not always in the form of public defense, but often in the form of doors closing at the right time to prevent you from stepping into the wrong place, relationships falling apart so you no longer have to strain to maintain them, delays that seem disadvantageous but help you avoid a greater price later. And if you look back soberly, you will see that there were times you thought you were blocked, but in reality you were held back, shielded from things that, if you continued in your old state, you wouldn't have been alert enough to recognize. They don't realize that each time they apply pressure, you become less manipulated, less in need of validation, less dependent on the reactions of others. And when a person is no longer easily swayed by external emotions, they become a very difficult variable to control because you are no longer playing in the same rhythm as them. For God's chosen one, a very quiet but powerful reversal is taking place when you maintain this awareness. From being targeted, you move to a state of being protected, not because you are unfairly favored, but because you have demonstrated through your presence that you are not acting out of panic, not retaliating from hurt, and not letting pressure turn you into a distorted version of yourself. And when a person maintains their inner axis amidst pressure, they naturally enter another safe zone where targeted attacks no longer have the same effect as before. Let this statement go straight to your consciousness. No argument needed, no further explanation required. They target you, but they activate your defenses, because every time they try to break you, you stand stronger. Every time they expect you to react, you retreat into composure, and every time they think you're cornered, you're led out of a dead end they can't see. And the moment you understand this, the fear of being targeted is no longer central. Instead, there's a feeling of certainty and coolness, that you're not alone on this journey, that not all pressure comes to break you, and that some things are only activated when you're tested deeply enough, truly enough, and for long enough. From here on, You no longer ask how to avoid that gaze, but begin to walk with renewed steadfastness, because you know that you're not just enduring, but being held in your rightful place, God's chosen one. Once you understand that being targeted is not a sign of weakness, but a consequence of the light you carry, the most important thing now is not what you need to do more, but to avoid the wrong reaction. Because the biggest mistake of those watching you is believing that with enough pressure, you will reveal yourself, justify yourself, confront the situation, and lose a position you never even had to fight for. Listen carefully to this, because it goes against human instinct. You don't need to justify yourself, because explaining yourself always puts you at a disadvantage in the role of the one who has to explain, while what's happening isn't a misunderstanding that needs clarification, but a test to see if you're easily drawn into someone else's game. And each explanation at this point only inadvertently provides more data for those observing you from afar. You also don't need to confront, because confrontation only makes things clear in a way that's disadvantageous to you, turning what's happening in the shadows into an open battle where you're forced to choose sides, choose your words, while your true strength lies in the fact that you don't need to step into that arena to prove your existence. And above all, you don't need to retaliate, because retaliation always stems from emotional reactions, and emotions are the only thing those targeting you can use to manipulate you. They don't need you to lose, they just need you to lose control of your rhythm. Because when you react in the way they anticipate, you've stepped into the role they want you to play, a chosen one of God. What you need right now sounds simple, but requires immense inner strength. Silence. Not the silence of fear or avoidance, but a purposeful silence, where you don't say anything unnecessary, don't explain what no one has the right to question, don't reveal your emotions to those who have no right to touch them. Because silence at the right time isn't weakness, but a way to maintain control of the situation. Along with silence comes observation, not observation to doubt everything, but to see patterns clearly, to see who changes when you stand firm, who reveals insecurity when you don't react, who begins to behave differently when you no longer play by the old rhythm. Because in this sober observation, many relationships will reveal their true nature without you needing to ask. And while remaining silent and observing, the most important thing is that you continue on the right path, not deviating just to avoid attention, not slowing down just to make someone more comfortable, not changing your nature just to quell surrounding disturbances, because your path does not need the consensus of the majority to continue to exist. God's chosen one. Remember that those targeting you are always hoping for a wrong reaction. They expect you to say too much. They expect you to explain. They anticipate you to erupt, because each such reaction is a loophole for them to push you out of your current state of composure. And when you don't give them that, when you maintain a steadfast presence amidst the disturbances, you not only protect yourself, but also dismantle the entire strategy aimed at you without direct confrontation. Your presence at this moment is the strongest answer, because a person not pulled away by external reactions, a person who moves forward without needing to prove anything, a person who maintains their inner axis amidst scrutinizing gazes, is a person who cannot be manipulated in the usual way. Let this final statement be etched into your mind, not as a slogan, but as a principle for living during this period. The chosen one does not win by reaction, but by presence. And when you live by that principle, you will realize that many things that once stressed you will naturally fall out of your control, not because they disappear, but because you are no longer in a position where they can manipulate you. From this moment on, you don't need to win against anyone, because your presence, your continued progress, your unwavering spirit is victory without noise, without confrontation, and without any further explanation. O chosen one of God, before you leave this moment, allow me to hold you for one more breath, not to persuade, not to provoke, but to lock in the energy that has just been awakened within you. Because if you truly have no value, if your presence is merely a faint dot in the crowd, if the path you are treading is just an anonymous trail leading to no change, then no one will target you. No silent, watchful eyes will be watching. No timely obstacles will appear. No subtle disturbances will force you to be more alert than necessary, because this world is very pragmatic. It doesn't waste energy paying attention to what is unlikely to make an impact, and so let this truth go straight to you without beating around the bush, without avoiding it. If you have no value, no one will target you. Look back on your journey honestly, without arrogance but also without self-deprecation, to see that the times you were most scrutinized, hindered, and challenged were not when you gave up, not when you blended in, but when you began to live more authentically, when you no longer needed to show off, to stand out, no longer needed tricks to advance, no longer needed to pretend to be someone you knew. And it was at that moment that the light within you became clear enough to create contrast, strong enough to draw the attention of those accustomed to darkness. For the chosen one of God, there is a profound paradox that only those who reach this point understand. Being targeted is not a curse, but a sign of confirmation, for no one follows someone incapable of going further, no one seeks to slow down someone going in the wrong direction, and no one bothers with a weak light, insufficient to reveal anything around them. So when you are targeted, it means you have gone far enough to no longer be invisible, different enough to no longer be predictable, and real enough to not be overlooked. Let this concluding statement sink deep within you, not as a comforting remark, but as a pillar of awareness. The fact that you are being targeted is proof that you are on the right path, true to the nature you have long possessed, but only recently dared to fully live. True to the path forged through pressure, not through ease. True to a quiet but weighty light. And when you allow yourself to believe in it, the fear within you will not disappear, but it will change roles, from something that pulls you back to something that keeps you alert, from a defensive reflex to a steadfast presence. God's chosen one. This conclusion is not written to close the story, but to create an aftershock gentle enough not to panic, chilling enough not to be forgotten, and firm enough to help you stand taller as you move forward. For what you are experiencing is not the final climax, but a turning point where you learn not to react wrongly, not to make futile justifications, not to confront recklessly, but to choose purposeful silence, mindful observation, and to continue on the right path even while the gaze remains. If these lines not only pass through your ears, but also touch your chest, making you feel a very strange, very cold, but very firm confirmation, as if something inside you has just nodded without words, then understand that you are at the right stage to move forward, not to seek validation, but to keep your axis amidst the turmoil. God's chosen one, if you feel it clearly, without reason, without explanation, write 777, not as a formal ritual, but as a silent affirmation to yourself that you have realized you are not lost, that what is happening is not meant to diminish you, but to force you to stand firmer. And if you are in this stage, the stage of being scrutinized, targeted, tested, but also the stage where you are most alert, clearest, and truest ever, then stay, because the next part is not for the curious, not for those seeking special sensations, but for those ready to go deeper, where you will learn to be present without proving yourself, to move forward without noise, and to stand in your rightful place, even when no one is standing beside you. Because from the moment you choose to stay, this journey will no longer revolve around avoiding gaze, but about walking steadily within that gaze, with a new certainty, a weighty silence, and a light that needs no permission to exist.